fabulous video. Well, good evening, everybody. It is so wonderful to see a packed house on a Friday night. Well done to you all for being here. My name's Bryony Benjamin. I'm your MC this evening, and delighted to have people from all over the Gold Coast, from all the electorates, here tonight to have a night with Zali Steggall. We're thrilled to have the fabulous independent member for Warringah here with us tonight, who I'm going to introduce shortly. But firstly, before we get underway, I would just like to acknowledge that we meet, of course, on the lands of the Kumeri people tonight, and pay my respect to elders past and present, and thank them for their beautiful custodianship of what I think is one of the most beautiful parts of the country. Now, we are hosted tonight by the Community Independence Project, who are responsible for that brilliant video, and also the three fabulous local groups who are on the hunt for an independent candidate and are firing up their campaign. So can I have a cheer if you are from the Voices of Moncrief group? And a newer campaign off the ranks. It's a smaller group, but a small but mighty group. If you are from Fadden, can you give us a cheer, please? And my electorate, the electorate I grew up in, can we have a cheer if you are from the McPherson crew? All right, fantastic. And we are going to hear shortly, actually, I'll just do one more introduction. So I'd normally ask you to put your phones away now, but I'm going to ask you to get them out, because we're going to be using an interactive tool tonight called Menti. So a QR code will come up shortly, and it's going to allow you to ask questions tonight. So if you've got questions for Zali throughout the evening, put them in, and they'll be there when we get to question time. But to start and kick us off, I'm going to get you to answer the first question. It'll take you in, and it's going to ask you, what are the issues that are most important to you in your electorate? Now, we've picked these issues based on the top ones that came up in the listening report that McPherson ran. So we've got honesty, integrity and transparency, accessibility and visibility, compassion. You can see them, I won't read them all out. But, you might want all of them, but pick what's your number one. What's your number one? And we'll see what comes through so we can see where the audience is. Can we get that code back, Mel? Is that possible? There's some sheets being handed around if you did miss it. Mel's going to run around for everyone. But it's looking like we've got a lot of votes for honesty, integrity, and transparency. Woohoo! Long-term planning's rising up the ranks. Care for the environment. I'll let those answers keep coming in. We're a tech-savvy crew in here. Very well done, everyone. The answers are pouring in. So interesting, we've got, integrity and environment are sort of leading the way in this room tonight. And now we might go to the next Menti interactive question. So it's going to ask you, what are you here for tonight? What do you want to hear about? What are you here to learn about? Give me one word. Sum it up in a word. What's tonight about for you? Politics, yes. Learning, inspiration, support, the future, the journey. Community, information, encouraging, people looking for some inspiration. All right, you're going to get all that and so much more. So it is my delight now to introduce the fabulous Tina Jackson. She is the co-founder of the Community Independence Project, and we've also got the wonderful Liz here tonight as well. So Liz is down the front. Thanks for being here with us both. Now, Tina is the co-founder of the Community Independence Project and the executive director, and it's an organisation that supports community groups all around the country, as you saw in the video. So Tina, let's give her a big warm Gold Coast welcome.
Thank you so much, Bryony, and so wonderful to be here in such a cool venue. I want to say something about that video that you saw a moment ago. So we made that video for the Community Independence Convention in June, and I hope you're as inspired by it as we are, and everyone was at the convention. Well, that was June, and can I tell you that some of those groups there, some of those fledgling groups are already so much bigger in just a few months. It's just extraordinary what's happened. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the movement in a moment. And it's so exciting to be here tonight, to be with you all, and that you give up your Friday night to come and talk about doing politics differently. We've had a whirlwind visit, and it's been the Zali Roadshow, and we started on Wednesday with Fisher and Fairfax, and then last night in Dixon, and of course tonight on the beautiful Sunshine Coast, spanning the electorates of McPherson and Moncrief and Fadden, and I... Gold Coast! What did I say? Sunshine! Well, that's just what the trip has been like, I've got to say. Yes. Which I'm like, where are we today? My apologies. The Gold Coast. You were very right to correct me. But I have got it right with the badges, right? So I'm wearing everyone's badges. It's like when too many badges is not enough. So, as Bryony said, I'm here from the Community Independence Project, but I am also from Warringah, proudly independent Warringah, and Zali is my MP, and we could not be more proud of her. What she's achieved and her extraordinary bravery and leadership. She has changed the national conversation on so many fronts, from climate action to risk assessment to truth in political advertising. And she's been and continues to be an inspiration for other communities wanting an independent who truly represents them. She is the OG Teal, and she is the lighthouse for the community independence movement, and I can't wait for you to hear from her in a moment. So I'm part of the team that got Zali elected in 2019 and again in 2020. None of us had been involved in federal politics before, although we just jumped off the cliff together, and we threw everything that we had at it. But my top line message for you tonight is that we did it, and you can absolutely do it too. And something that I absolutely know, that it starts with nights like tonight, and it's powered by the events that you're going to keep having. And as I said, in just a few months, those groups, those fledgling groups, some of them are actually quite large. So a little bit about the background of CIP and how we came about. So after 2019, people were coming up to us in Warringah and saying, we want our own Zali, and how do we do it? So we set about helping the electorates around us, McKellar, North Sydney, Wentworth, and further afield, and we wanted to share what we had learnt. And then, meanwhile, Cathy McGowan, who was elected in Indi in 2013 and again in 2016, and she passed the baton on to Helen in 2019, she was spreading the word about how they did it in Indi. So in 2021, we decided we would bring all that work together in what we've called the Community Independence Project, and it's Cathy and myself and two other key people from Indi, Alana Johnson and Jill Briggs. So our purpose is really simple. It's to get more community independents elected to federal parliament. And our vision is to put community at the centre of politics, for better governance, for better government, and for a better Australia. And we wanted to share the learnings, as I said, and to get people who had successfully run campaigns to pass on their learnings. But importantly, what we do is connect the groups from around the country, and a wonderful 6 Southeast Queensland groups. They've been working together so well to put all these events on, and the collegiality and the sharing is really amazing. So we want to foster that sharing, and we get the groups together regularly, And they tell us what's new, and of course there'll be a lot to report from this little visit. But we ask them to say what help can they give and what help do they need, because this is the secret sauce, the magic of the movement, how we are all supporting each other. And CIP is the heartbeat of the movement, and we are building these incredible networks of trust. So 2022 was the launch pad for the movement. 6 new community independents were added to the crossbench to join Helen Haynes and Zali. And this was powered by over 20,000 volunteers. And it was a seismic change in Australian politics. And at the core of the movement is people wanting MPs who truly represent them, which reflect their values and a better way of doing politics. In short, integrity. So community is the DNA of the movement. But the movement is like an iceberg. You know, the top 10% are our wonderful MPs like Zali, but the 90% below the water, they're wonderful people like you, volunteer workers, community groups, and the people that step up to do the work. And there is a lot of work, and I quite like the saying that they have in Kooyong to chop wood and carry water, and yeah, we all do a lot of that when we run campaigns. And the convention that I mentioned before, just to give you an idea of the growth in the movement, we held our first convention in 2021, and we thought about 50 people might come, but 300 people ended up coming from across 80 electorates, and we were blown away, and we knew that we had hit a nerve. And that convention, direct line can be drawn from that convention to the success of 2022. And the convention that we had this year in 2024, we had over 1,000 people attend that, and across 125 electorates. So that's 83% of the electorates came along to talk about people-powered politics. And from a handful of electorate groups back in 2019, literally a handful, we now have over 40 groups throughout the country. And that convention really turbocharged the growth in those groups. They're from across in New South Wales, from Wannon, Cowper, Farrer, in Victoria, and Nichols, and Monash, and Casey, and then in South Australia, Sturt, and Bray, and in Tasmania, Brandon and Lyons, and in WA, Moore and Forest, just to give you an idea. And some of those groups didn't even exist when we had the convention. And of course, in Queensland we have Broome, and on the Sunshine Coast, I'm going to get it right now, it is Fisher and Fairfax and Dixon, and of course, thank you, and of course here in the wonderful Gold Coast. So all the electorates are at different stages. Several electorates are running candidates again that they ran in 2022, and a number of them have already announced. But there are other electorates who are just publishing their listening reports, and others who are announcing their candidate search. And I just want to really emphasise in the candidate search that you need to look far and wide and to not rush your choice. Because all the while you'll be building community, and like tonight, events like tonight. Because what you're doing is you're building a platform for the right candidate to step on. And they will have the confidence to give up the job that they might be in to step onto this platform to represent you. So we are turning politics on its head. It is community first and then candidate. And it's easy, I think, for people to worry that we don't have a candidate yet, but just hold the course, stay the course, and until you know you've really found the one that represents your values and your views. You are part of an historic disruption, and the path may not always be clear, and success is not a straight line, and you may be outside your comfort zone. And we do have a saying that we use a lot in the independence movement, and that is about growing your courage muscle. And Kathy McGowan, if she was here, she'd tell you all to keep exercising that courage muscle. But can I say, along the way, you will have the most rewarding journey. You'll meet like-minded people, you will make new friends, and you will have a lot of fun. This is a joyful, positive movement where everyone is welcome. And I have to say, as we look around the world, to the United States and other places, we can see that democracy is very fragile. Democracy is precious and not something we should take for granted. Because no matter what your primary passion is, and we've got a sense of those from the Menti just then, whatever it is, a well-functioning democracy and a well-functioning political system must be our number one priority. So please join us, join the movement. Democracy is not a spectator sport. Step up. If you're not wearing a t-shirt already, get a t-shirt and don those badges. Get out with your jog and the bandanas. I'm sure they're coming. The bucket hats, the stickers, the tote bags. Talk to your friends, talk to your neighbours, spread the word. And Liz has got a wonderful display that she's brought here from some of the campaigns around the country if you need some inspiration. And I'll do a final plug for our website if you would like to see that video again and be re-energised and re-inspired. It's communityindependenceproject.org, and there are some amazing resources on there too. And if you didn't get to come to the convention, you can listen to all of the recordings of the convention there. So thank you so much for coming tonight. Thank you for caring about your democracy, and thank you for being part of people-powered politics. And Zali's next, I'm pretty sure, and if you're not pumped and inspired enough by the video, you will certainly be after you hear the wonderful Zali. Give her a big clap.
Thank you so much, Tina. All right, it's time for what we're all here for, to hear from Zali. So many of you will know her story, but I'm just going to give you a quick recap. She is, of course, the independent member for the seat of Warringah in Sydney's north. She was formerly a barrister, and fun fact, is regarded as Australia's most successful alpine skier, which I think is pretty awesome. Zali contested the federal seat of Warringah in 2019. The seat had been held by Tony Abbott for 25 years, and it was a very safe seat. But not only did she win it with a historic campaign, in 2022, Zali retained the seat with an even bigger margin. So we're pumped to hear from you tonight, Zali. Thanks for being here on the Gold Coast. Give her a warm welcome.
I hope that's going to work well. I've got to say, first of all, this is the coolest venue we've had on this roadshow. So I'm very, very pumped, very impressed. If I could start by paying my respects to traditional elders of the land on which we meet, and just acknowledge their incredible custodianship of this land. And I think we live in paradise. Really, Australia is just an incredibly unique continent of incredible beauty and diversity. But we have not been taking good enough care of it. And when I look at the traditional elders and traditional owners and the care they took, we have a lot to learn. And so it is with that kind of focus that I really, embrace the responsibility that I have now as an elected member of Parliament. Now, I'd like to say also a really huge thank you for Tina and Liz that are up here. Now, Tina hates public speaking, so it takes a lot for her to be out here, but it's how much it means to her to be really encouraging communities to take back their vote, their representation, and really know how much you can move the dial when it comes to politics. Now, I generally describe myself as a non-politician politician. It was not on my bingo card to become a politician. I had a long sporting career, I moved into law, enjoyed my legal career. I was on boards, I was an arbitrator on International Court for Sport. You know, I had a lot going. But like so many of you, I probably spent way too many hours yelling at the TV. I was really frustrated when I felt that on so many issues, but in particular on the environment and climate and integrity and equality, we had, I think, what I would call fact-resistant politics, right? The policies that seemed to come out of government, of our representatives, were too often based on power and maybe, you know, the duopoly that was going on, but not really based on facts, on what was actually going to solve the problem. For too often it's negative politics and it's about blaming the other side without taking any responsibility for maybe what your own side has contributed to the problem, or genuinely coming to the table to solve it. As a barrister, I had to participate in mediation a lot. And mediation is a really telling opportunity where people very entrenched in their views have to come to the table and solve the problem, right? Come and find that middle ground. And more often than not, you have to compromise a bit, but you come out with outcomes that are good, that ultimately allow people to move on. And so for me, when I looked at politics as a, you know, I guess a professional woman, I just felt quite despairing that I just didn't see that happening. I really didn't feel represented. So I got into politics really hoping to offer my community a different choice. You've all got to remember, a seat that stays safe for a long time, the reason is often, despite the community often saying, I don't feel represented and I don't like politicians, and we know that, you know, the trust in politicians is really low, and I think lawyers are only one step above. Yet, ultimately, politicians are only there because you elect them, right? You ultimately put them there. But we have to remember we have a great system of, from our voting point of view, in terms of preferential voters and compulsory voting, but people can only vote for names on the ballot paper, right? And they are restricted by those choices. And that's why the community movement is so incredibly important, because it is from within that you are stepping up and putting people on the ballot that are from communities to represent that. So in 2019, as I said, it was a bit of a really a short decision for me. I'd seen a newspaper article that was talking about, you know, the community movement that had really was bubbling away. We had many different groups that had been working together. They had been looking for candidates. I was quite oblivious of it. So for everyone looking for candidates, don't assume people in your community know, because people are busy and may not be aware. And so you really have to step up that search. So I was quite unaware until my running partner, who lives next door to a man called Mark Kelly, who started a group called Vote Tony Out. And that was a group where they had the t-shirts, quite colourful, and they ended up on the front page of the paper. Lane Beach, a good friend, you know, wore it and really talked about how there was this movement. And that was the first I became aware of that movement within our community. I duly bought a few of those t-shirts, and they were my Christmas presents to my family that year. I saw a newspaper article that, you know, identified sort of the demographics of Warringah and who the kind of candidate Anthony Green felt would be the best place to take on Tony. And it identified that it was a professional woman, 35 to 50, ideally with a sporting background and a bit of profile. And I thought, well, you know, I sort of feel like I've got a bit of a responsibility here. And as Tina said, politics is not a spectator sport, right? You can feel frustrated about the state of politics, but unless you step up and put your skills in there, it's just not going to change. And that is what the current system relies on. It relies on the assumption, the apathy, the idea that, oh, it's too hard to change, it's too big an obstacle, and we'll let that be. And I think that's what we're really shaking up. And when people say, well, what have independents achieved when it comes to government or policies, there's many things we can talk about. But I think ultimately the most important one is there's no such thing as a safe seat anymore. Your communities cannot be taken for granted. And why did it really bubble up in Warringah? Well, Warringah, to give you an example, in 2013, We had a long-standing Liberal mayor for the local council in Manly. We had our state member was Mike Baird, who was Premier of the state, Premier of New South Wales. And we had our local federal member was Tony Abbott, and he was Prime Minister. And yet, we had the same promises election after election around local issues, and still nothing getting done, and still no movement on those issues. And so the community just really said, it doesn't pay to be a safe seat, right? It is just not how your views and your issues go to the top of the issues list in Canberra. So I think that's really telling. But for me, it was about doing politics differently. So for us in 2019, we had the 3 Ps, being polite, positive, and purposeful. And I think it will resonate for all of you. We actually had the imagery of surfing a wave. And you want to surf that wave and stay on top of the wave. You want to ride that all the way into election day, right? You don't want to get caught up in the whitewash and the argy-bargy of politics. You don't want to get taken off message. You don't want to be pulled down into a fight that's not what you're there for. And so we were incredibly disciplined, and the team was focused on what we were there to really do. And you need to remember, even if you don't have experience in politics, politics is actually like running a small business, especially as an independent. So many of us did not have experience, right? We were drawing on Karen Phelps's experience at her by-election and from Cathy McGowan's experience. But ultimately, what Warringah did was we thought about it as a business, and so many people have that experience. And with that in mind, you absolutely can nail it. Now, from a policy point of view, one of the things that came to light for me at that first election, and I was actually quite shocked as a lawyer, was that we don't have any protections around truth in political advertising. When it comes to protecting your money, when it comes to when you're doing a transaction for goods or services, we have consumer law to protect you from misleading and deceptive advertising. And yet here we are. The one maybe transaction, you know, the action of voting, which is the most important thing we can all do in a democracy, has no protections when it comes to misleading and deceptive advertising. And I found that really, really shocking. So one of the first things I went about doing was preparing a private members bill around truth in political advertising. And the interesting thing is that poll after poll shows that voters of all persuasion, regardless of whether you've traditionally voted One Nation, Nationals, Liberals, you know, well, up here it's LNP, but you know, Labor or the Greens, all voters overwhelmingly say they want truth in political advertising. But do you think the major parties would make that a priority to act on it, right? Very, very reluctant, because they've all taken advantage of those loopholes. You know, each side has at various times taken advantage of that. And it's incredibly frustrating. So we are now at a position where the government has said they will legislate for truth in political advertising. And what's interesting is we've seen Gavin Newsom in California introduce that he is going to do it over there. And so it's really important to see that movement and the pressure that's building on the government. And what we've seen, what the private members bill that I prepared, and I've reintroduced it as voter protections and continually pushing for it to be debated in Parliament and met with the Minister a lot about it, is to also deal with deepfakes, because we are in an era where AI and deepfakes are really going to impact elections. And in fact, the Commissioner for the AEC has already warned the government and everyone in Parliament that we are not prepared for the first AI election, that there is real risk of misinformation, of deepfakes impacting it. And we've seen it in the UK election, and it is happening in the US. So that's just a classic example where the major parties are just not willing to go there until they are pushed by expectation by the community. Of course, in the last Parliament, we saw that around integrity, and it was great to see in your word cloud that comes up a lot, that question of integrity and accountability. Now, it was a push of the crossbench. It was with Helen Haines that we repeatedly pushed and pressured around the formation and the commitment to a National Anti-Corruption Commission. Now, the model we've ultimately gotten is not perfect, because there really isn't much public around what the work it's doing. And that, unfortunately, was a deal between the major parties. Labor and the Coalition did a deal to keep the hearings private. But ultimately, we've at least got a knack on the table, and it can be improved. And you can amend, and it will be up for review to see how it's working. So for me, that just shows in a classic way just how important it is to have the crossbench pushing the agenda, really, prosecuting the case for changes, for issues the major parties just don't really want to tackle. At the moment, one of the ones we're really seeing is around gambling advertising. We all love our sport, but geez, it's riddled with gambling ads, right? And that is incredibly damaging. It's $27 billion that gets sucked out of the Australian economy, out of household budgets and families, because of how just how dangerous and addictive gambling is, and how powerful that advertising is. And what we're seeing with the government, they are not willing at the moment to follow the recommendations of the multi-partisan report that they actually led the way on, or their members led the way on, the late Peter Murphy. And so that is a classic issue that we are not going to be letting go, right? The government will continue to face those questions in question time. We will continue to put that pressure. And what's been disappointing has been how silent the opposition has been on the issue. They, despite supporting the report and the recommendations, you haven't really heard the leader of the opposition say too much about banning gambling advertising, right? Because it's always a question of, well, if we don't really have to go there, we'll just wait and see. And I guess the other area that for me is so critically important is around the environment and climate change. As an athlete, the way you win is by looking for that edge, embracing technology. What's that final little thing that will get you over the line 1/100th of a second faster? As a professional woman, as a mum, doing my cases in court, I rely on expert opinions, right? You rely on the experts to really bring forward the case, to understand the facts. And as I said before, for too long we have had really fact-resistant policies, right? The evidence is so clear. The scale of the opportunity we have around transition, but also the risk. So a major piece of work I did in the last term of Parliament was pushing the major parties to commit to net zero by 2050, pushing them with the Climate Act bill. And what we saw was it became this obstacle. We created the social license with all the communities that they had to commit. And one of the first orders of business of the Albanese government was to legislate net zero by 2050. And of course didn't want to use the bill I'd prepared, but they were very quick to enact provisions that were within that bill. Now, it's not perfect, and the next step that we need to talk about is risk assessments and adaptation. We talk of, we know cost of living is a major issue. So many things are high at the moment with inflation. Now, for many, and around the communities that I've been on this roadshow, what's been fascinating is the high level of home ownership. And one of your biggest items is actually your insurance premium. Since 2022, they've increased by 32%. And unfortunately, that is not going in any other direction than continuing to go up. And that is because of just how much has been paid out on exacerbated events and disasters. And I know the skeptics will say, look, Australia has always had disasters. What we're seeing is an acceleration and an intensification of those events, and the scale of claims, the scale of damage is just making it, is making insurance simply unaffordable. We will have areas of Australia that will be uninsurable, and we already have huge areas underinsured, but they will be uninsurable. And what that means is they're unlendable, they're unmortgageable, right? And in a housing crisis where we're talking about supply and needing to build so much more, you're going to have zones where the banks won't lend to those areas because they won't be able to insure against the risk. And so I think this is another iceberg problem that we're really, the major parties are just kind of, they sort of refer to it, but they don't engage with the question. We still don't invest anywhere near enough in adaptation and preparation to keep communities safe. Anyone that has been to a community hit by bushfires or floods just knows the damage, the extent of disruption, the kids, the days of school they miss, the post-traumatic stress they have. It really is extensive, and we have to do better at preparing. Now, one of the things I've done recently is I've hosted a roundtable in Canberra. I had the Assistant Minister attend, around a private member's bill to legislate for national climate risk assessments to happen in a regular way with a clear threshold and to happen independently of the departments. So it's not the government of the day saying what I would like to see assessed and what I don't really want everyone to know about. It would be independently done so communities can know what sector is exposed, what area they really, where do you need to be concentrating your efforts. And then it legislates for the government of the day to have to actually publicly put forward plans to adapt, right? Not tokenistic little bits of budget time where you really have to go searching through the mire of the budget papers to see just what tiny amount might have been put into play for this. What the insurance industry tells us, and every sector, for every $1 invested in preparation, you save $11 on disaster recovery. So when we know the bill around disasters is just going to be astronomical, it makes sense to invest now. But do you think that's a priority of the major parties or government? Unfortunately, no, because the current politics is so focused on every 3 years, right? It's the short-termism of how our politics works. And the major parties are so focused on the idea of blame them and I want to get back into power or I want to hold on to power. It's so short-term that no one is willing to really step up and acknowledge the complexity of solving these problems, but also the need to have long-term policy. At my roundtable, the banks and the industry groups, the investors all had one clear message. We need policy stability, we need long-term policy, we need visibility so that we can make those long-term investments. So that is absolutely a priority that I'll be taking to Parliament next time we're down there, but also as I continue to work on this private members bill, meeting with the minister about it, but also the next election. Because as I said to my community in 2019, that I absolutely committed to be their champion on behalf of climate action, and that is a passion for me. I'm a mum. I've got adult kids now, but I am concerned about the generational inequity and the debt we are leaving them, the challenges they face. And it's great to see young people here tonight, but I've seen some in the last couple of nights as well, and they are fired up. They want to have a say in the policies and the impact. The fact that both major parties have fought the idea that a Minister for the Environment owes a duty of care to future generations says a lot of where the major party politics are. They don't think they owe a responsibility to our kids and future generations for the environment they will be in. That is crazy. And unfortunately, legal challenges around decisions are bound by the laws. So for everyone thinking, what can we really do? How do we change the game? Ultimately, what brought me to the table was, as an advocate, as a barrister in court, I could do my best on the day to argue around the laws and try and do my best for a client. But ultimately, I was bound and restricted by the status of the laws. The one place where those laws get drafted, where they get passed and they become the thing that dictates your lives, is in Parliament. And so those representatives that everyone votes for have that responsibility to make sure those laws are fit for purpose, make sure they have review processes so we can amend them and tweak them. I think it's a really difficult situation when we expect perfection of everyone, especially of our leaders, and they need to be able to work on these big problems. We need to be able to evolve. Things like housing supply and the housing crisis, rental affordability, and housing affordable, these are big problems. They've been brewing for 40 years. It's going to take a lot of different approaches to solve them. But unfortunately, we still have, I think, in the political psyche of the parties, the idea that it's about wedging, that it's about scoring a point over the other side, rather than coming together to really work on it. So, I'm glad to say that is the approach the crossbench takes. So many of us as independents are focused on the solutions. I want to leave you with, for example, in this term of Parliament, I've moved 166 amendments to about 20 bills, and there's been over 300. Of those amendments, some have passed. Some have been adopted by government and they've passed it themselves. Some I've passed on to the crossbench in the Senate and they have negotiated and passed them in some form or another. And I know the media will often say, well, show us exactly what you've achieved. And they tend to have this idea that you've got to be able to point to a road or a hospital. And the irony is that's everything that's wrong with politics, because that's ultimately pork barreling. What you want to show is the things that have changed, the discussions, the discourse, the areas of policies that are being able to evolve. So from my point of view, it's an incredible privilege to represent Warringah, but it's been so exciting to do this roadshow of Queensland, starting up on the Sunshine Coast, going to Dixon and now coming down here. You guys, it is so exciting to see communities stepping up for it, right? We can't be bystanders anymore. There's no doubt that not everyone stomachs the publicity or the being there, but you will know leaders in your community that will have all those right ingredients to come on and be a voice for your community. So as Tim Walz recently said in the US election, he pointed out that for many people over there, they don't have the benefit of compulsory voting. But many people say, I'm not interested in politics, it's that nasty thing, it happens down in camp, it happens far away, nothing to do with me, I don't really like it, don't trust them. And I did see in some of your listening reports, a lot of people don't trust politicians, which I don't, I say I probably don't blame me. But what Tim Walz did say was, whilst you may not be interested in politics, politics is in your life, right? And it is very true. Politics decides the laws that dictate your opportunities, your kids' debts when it comes to university, right? The HECS debate, the debt that people are incurring, what support small businesses are getting, where infrastructure is going on merit or on pork barrel. All those things matter, right? How much tax you're paying, all these things really matter. So I think as a democratic country, and as Tina said, there are not many countries in the world, but we don't have that many democracies. It is our duty and responsibility to step up, engage in it, hold our representatives to account. I know I am one vote of 125,000 in Warringah, and I take very seriously the listening and the feedback I get from them. And I know there'll be some questions, so I won't cover it all now, but I really, congratulations on being here tonight. It's been so exciting to see the Community Independent Project and all of your community groups really coming together. I encourage you all to work together. One of the great things about the Crossbench is whilst we're all independents and we're true to our communities, we are incredibly collegiate, collaborative in terms of assisting each other where we can, but also bouncing ideas and how we do it. And I think that is the strength of it. It's something that bewilders the major parties, but it really is. So politics shouldn't be about power, it should be about policies. And so that is what I love about this movement, and I'm so excited to see what comes out of your communities. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Zali. That was incredible to hear about the story, the journey so far, and the learnings that we can take away from that, and to hear of the impact and the power independents are having in the Parliament. Now, Zali, you might not know this, but I first heard of you in quite a random way, actually. I was 12 years old. I was on my very first family holiday overseas, and we were sitting on a beach in the south of France, and we heard this quite Aussie French coming from a beach towel across the way. And my parents struck up a conversation with this delightful couple that told us about their amazing kids and how they'd moved to the French Alps and grown up on the ski slopes. Their incredible daughter Zali and their son Zeke, am I saying that correctly? And we just heard this extraordinary story, and we were just enchanted by it as small girls. And it wasn't until, and it was actually the next year, that you won Australia's first ever medal at the Winter Olympics. So we were pretty chuffed to be like, oh, we met Zali's parents. That's so cool. But I would go back to that because I'm just interested. It was such a fascinating upbringing. But to be an Olympian and to have that background, how do you think that's really shaped what you've gone on to do next, and that different sort of upbringing?
Look, yeah, I mean, I'm incredibly lucky. I mean, Australia hits above its weight when it comes to sport, right? And I guess if you think back sort of a good 25 years ago now, it was unusual to be pursuing a dream of winter sports from, the beaches of northern beaches, Sydney, Manly. I was a Manly girl. But I had had that incredible opportunity of growing up in the French Alps, and I was very, very competitive, still am, but very competitive. And for me, it was when I was about 13, I remember watching the Olympics and thinking, I want to get to the Olympics for Australia. And not really thinking that this was a dream that was difficult to achieve or how big the obstacle might be, but just simply setting that dream, setting that goal, and then you go about chipping away at it. How do you make it come true? And it takes time. I went to my first Olympics when I was 17, and I had to choose between studies or going to those games. Of course, I had to come back, and actually, I had a great day today because I got to go back to Griffith University, which I'm an alumni. They were one of the first universities with an open learning program to be able to do that while you travel. And they are actually, they had the most number of medalists at the Olympics from their current students, just behind Stanford. So see, just pretty amazing. But for me, it was always never about thinking why you can't do something, but about why you can, right? The glass is always half full. You should never be afraid of the outcome for not giving something a go. What's the worst that can happen, right? I've fallen flat on my face at Olympic Games, you pick yourself up and you move on, right? So not being afraid of failure is really important. So for anyone thinking about what their skills might be to become a candidate, for example, it's not just to think about the negatives, right? Don't let that restrict you in your ambitions and goals or what you think you might be capable of. I know in our campaign, for example, in 2019, for a lot of people, very confronting to go door knocking or to talk to complete strangers, right? And I remember doing my first bus stop where I had to go and, talk to people on the line. And it was so outside my comfort zone, even for everything else I had done before. But it was really challenging. But being really, I guess, true to yourself, just being normal and having a normal chat was actually ultimately really... it was really enlightening and really rewarding to sort of get to do that. And so that's, I think, a really good part of just being a normal person in politics, of doing it. But I guess my Olympic journey has shown me that, yeah, you can, setting big goals and dreams is incredibly important. It's hard work. You do learn you have to train really hard. And Roger Federer recently said, most champions lose more points than they win, but you only remember the victory, right? You remember those points. And it's very true. There's always 10,000 hours of training that go into any success story. And even though when you see it on TV, it might look like it's an overnight success, it's not. It's because a lot of hard work's gone into it. And I think, the analogy is very true when it comes to this movement and moving the dial when it comes to representation. We had the same member for 25 years. It was a safe seat. It was, the problem was having someone, I guess, giving choice on the ballot box, right? Having people to have the choice for something different that was of the community. He's a Manly girl, so it wasn't. There's no, the community project certainly does not have anyone where the candidate is flown in from somewhere else the way the major parties seem to do regularly. And I'm always astounded when that pays off because I think there's the branding of the major parties. But ultimately, I think for communities, that's incredibly insulting. So, so I think my sporting career just really taught me to be, the hard work, being dedicated, disciplined around it. And knowing that, any setback, you actually learn more from setbacks than you do from success. So it's actually working out how to do it better next time. So for me, that was an incredible drive. And it set me up for my legal career, the opportunities I've had. But it also, I think, really is at the core of the courage that you need to step forward. But the fact that you have such an amazing team that comes forward with you.
I love that idea of, and it's a really important one, I think for all the groups here in the room, that approach that you had of, you've just got to go for it anyway, and if you fail, you fail. But we often say in this movement, you win either way, and as you sort of mentioned, competition is good for democracy, so having that option. And I'd love to just go back to that first campaign because it's fascinating and I think really interesting for us where we're all at with the groups here. Can you tell us a bit about what that campaign was like? And I'm interested to know, what was that turning point where you said, yes, I've got to do this? Because it's such an audacious thing to take on a safe seat and a former Prime Minister, and it's a seemingly impossible task. So what was that moment, and tell us a bit about that campaign.
Yeah, look, I think there are three really key ingredients to a successful campaign and to winning, and I think to really moving the dial in the seat and the whole, hopefully winning it. First is the tribe, right? The amount of people that are mobilised, that are there, and also being prepared to be visible. It was amazing in Warringah. An electorate that maybe not unlike others, never, didn't really talk about politics, you didn't really put up calls, there wasn't that much signage, you didn't really wear t-shirts and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, we had the community, there was teal and turquoise everywhere. We had bucket hats, we had t-shirts, we had bags, and people were shopping with it, they were walking the dogs had the bandanas, and people were proud to say, this is actually what I'm committed to and I'm standing up to. And it's so powerful to have, someone of your community standing in front of the shopping centre, talking to people they recognise, talking to people they know, and being able to say why they're there, what they're hoping it's going to achieve and where it's going. And so that excitement was important, but that's the tribe, right? So you are the number one ingredient to making this happen. It cannot happen without the tribe, and so it comes from that. Number two for me is the professionalism. I think that's my sporting roots, is if you're going to do something, you've got to do it properly. You can't just do it half-hearted or hope you can take on the big machine of a major party, and that is a slick operation. They have a lot of money, they have a lot of influence, and they are, they're big, they've been doing it for a long time. So you need to be professional about it. And a lot of people then worry, I don't have experience, how can I do that? But the reality is, it is like launching a small business, and many, many people in our communities have that experience, right? So you need to be very sure about what your product is, and your product is your candidate. And then you need to be very clear and disciplined about your message, how you, how you present it. There's a reason why a lot of my wardrobe is this colour.
And great accessories too.
But you have to be disciplined about what you're doing. And I think that professionalism is important. Get the information, do the research, and that's why these listening reports that you're all doing are so important. You need to know your community to represent your community. That really is important. And then finally, it is the candidate, right? But the candidate, a lot of people get hung up on the idea of that you need the candidate first, and then that will bring people or inspire people around. And it's actually, I don't think it is. I think build it and they will come, right? I think if you can build the tribe, build that structure and the professionalism, the candidates will come. They will come from within you. There will be people that will realise that you are going to be there with them. Because this is not a situation where even if you're successful and you get someone elected, you send them off to Canberra and that's it, job done, right? Warringah has found out, and my team has found out, that just getting elected, that's day one, right? You're on the start line once you're elected. Then the work really begins, and you have to continue with the community. And for me, so much of my team is from the community, and I have volunteers that have been with my team for 5 years, and they are absolutely core part of the team. People that have helped me on policy, make sure that I always have a person answering the phone, right? Even just reception, we call them our angels, because they are always there, and they have been there for 5 years, volunteering 5 days a week, making sure there is a person to answer the phone, to take the call from someone in the community that needs help with NDIS or aged care or Centrelink, right? And they need someone that can actually help and get on the phone to the department. And so we have established all those processes. But so the community, you're on the hook, right? This isn't just do it for a little bit and send them off. You are on the hook to be part of this, right? We want politics to change, and that means you stay involved. It's not just vote and do nothing for 3 years and come back. It's actually be involved every step of the way.
And yeah. They're not sure whether to clap because they're like, that sounds great, but it sounds like a lot of work. But I promise you, it's also going to be a lot of fun. I have the great privilege of getting to interview a lot of volunteers in different community groups around the country. And the one thing I'm always amazed to hear is they say, I heard a man in McKellar actually once say to me, I have found purpose through doing this campaign. This has been one of the best years of my life. He was in tears, you know. Another man said to me, I've made more friends in the last 6 weeks than I have in 16 years living in this electorate, you know, because like you said, you find those like-minded people, you find your tribe. So, yes, it's, you know, going to be work, but it's going to be joyful, fun work too, is what you often hear. Mal, we're gonna, if we could get the Menti up on the screen, because we'd love your questions to come through, and I'm going to funnel them to Zali, so keep them coming in. Zali, it's an exciting thought to think that there could be some potential candidates in the room coming to learn from you tonight and hear you in action. Twofold question. For anyone that's sitting there thinking, oh, maybe I will put my hat in the ring, what would your message be? And for us as the community groups looking, what should we be on the lookout for?
Well, again, that's up to all of you. So everyone, you know, your communities are unique and special, right? Everyone has their issues, and you really want to find that local voice, someone that's going to care about you first and foremost. I just find it incredibly frustrating where too many members of parliament are putting party above people, right, above their communities. So I think for everyone it's really important to appreciate that. And sorry, I will give you an anecdote. One of the first things that happened when I got to Parliament in 2019 is you go through security and there's this wall of pages, and pages have been in the news at the moment, but there's this wall of pages, and I thought, okay, I'll grab a page, because surely there's one, you know, for all of us. And in fact, no, it's just the major parties that have the pages. And the pager is actually to keep track of where all their members are, where their MPs are. And the pager actually buzzes and tells them when it's time to come down to vote or what they have to do. And that's actually how it works. And so often I'm down in the chamber and we are, you know, frantically working out what's the division on, who's called an amendment, what's happening, which piece of legislation, because we've always got briefs and everything ready, but you have 4 minutes to make it down, so you have to very quickly get on top of it. And so often, if we ask anyone, backbenchers or anyone from major parties, oh, you know, why are you supporting this? Don't, you know, doesn't this bother you? They're like, oh, you know, just, they don't, half the time don't even know what they're voting on. If you were to ask your MP when they come back, and this is all communities, not just here, if you were to ask your MP, okay, tell me what were the top 3 pieces of legislation you voted on this week in Parliament, I would not be surprised if many of them couldn't really focus or really couldn't say what they were, because they're just not engaging in the process. Whereas as an independent, I have to tell my community what's coming up, what's happening, give me your thoughts. We prepare briefs where we get feedback from the community, we get feedback from stakeholder groups. We make sure I understand the position of the electorate when I go to vote on pieces of legislation, that I understand the merits of that piece of legislation. So, backtracking to your question, I'm getting distracted.
I love that anecdote, it's amazing. It's amazing.
But I think, again, happy to have a chat with anyone who wants to understand, you know, what's and all, what it's like to be down there. It does take a village, right? It takes a tribe, it takes the support of everyone. It does take the support of your family as well. It is a lot of weeks away and things like that. But ultimately, it's just being prepared to be fact-based and analyse policy and issues, and turn to the experts to get the information to make sure we know. We have so much information, there's so much opportunity around our big problems, but too often they get sidelined for vested interest, for the lobbyists, for all the things that come down to Parliament House and impact where the decisions get made. And so rather than being anxious, you know, at home yelling at the TV, I think what's great about this is you get to find and work with like-minded people and talk about the issues, and you really can have fun doing it. So I think for anyone in the room, happy to have a chat, reach out. There's a lot of knowledge, and a part of this movement is about paying it forward, right? It's about, for those that have worked it out and communities that have gotten independence up, to pay it forward to other communities that want to change and move the dial. And that's why I'm here, right? I'm an independent. My focus is Warringah. I want to champion truth and political advertising and climate and solutions. But ultimately, I want to pay it forward. I want communities to really realise that the task is not so daunting and you can do it.
Yeah, fantastic. I love that. Yeah, give that a round of applause. I love that image of you going in your first day of Parliament going, oh, where's my pager? And they say, oh no, sorry, you've got to do your own homework. You don't just get told how to vote. All right, we've got some questions coming in. Mal, I think you're going to allow people to upvote the questions, aren't you? So we can see what the number one. You can go in now, click on the questions that you want most answered, and they will come to the top, and we'll know what your top questions are. But I did see a good one there that I might just pick out to start us on while we're waiting for the voting to come through, Zali. It said you obviously won in a safe Liberal seat that had been safe since the dawn of time, much like the 3 seats that are all here tonight. And what do you think was the key to success in being able to take that safe seat and make it independent?
Yeah, look, I think it's a little that, the anecdote I shared before, that despite having all 3 levels of government within one political party in power, still didn't move the dial, right? So this idea that you've got to be in government or in a major party to make a difference is just really, you just gets blown out of the water by that. And the community just really wanted something different, right? So disillusioned with the status quo. But we know that's happening all around the country. The primary vote for major parties keeps dropping over the last 15 years, and people are looking for competition, looking for alternatives. And that's up to you to give them the alternatives, right? People can only vote for the names that are on the ballot paper. If there isn't a community representative there, they don't have one to vote for, so you won't know it. So for Warringah, I think that was a really important part, having a choice that that reflected the values, the interests, and cared about the local issues. And the big picture, right? It's hyper-local, but it's also national. You have a responsibility to the national conversation, to the big policies. Climate change is a massive concern for so many in our communities, so many families and kids worrying about that. And also the frustration around the opportunities we miss by being laggards, right? The transition, the world is moving, whether people like it or not. And there is opportunities there to be at the forefront, to transition our economy, to really set ourselves up. But yet, there's a few people that have been fact resistant when it comes to certain policies. The previous member for Warringah was one of them. And it just meant that we miss out on those opportunities, and that is frustrating. So voters of all persuasion have come to, I guess, support the independent movement and support me in Warringah. It is frustrated Liberals who have voted Liberal for many, many years, but never felt like they just weren't being heard. Their views weren't reflected, The members would say one thing in the electorate and do something else down in Canberra when it came time to vote. Then you have voters that have voted maybe Labor or Greens or Independent, who are frustrated because they don't feel heard. They don't feel they're going to have a say, that they've got the power to change it. I think ultimately everyone has to think about their vote. Their vote is precious, it is valuable. If there's one thing I've observed in Canberra is they all care about their job and they all want to keep their job, right? MPs, especially career politicians, they want to keep their jobs. And so hold them to account. You absolutely have that power. Your vote is not just something they need every 3 years. They need to respect your views on issues. And I think that's really important.
Absolutely. Now, can we see the suspense is killing me. What have we got? So this one here. How important was name recognition in your campaign? Is it possible to launch a candidate without such a high profile?
Well, I hadn't done anything public for a good 10, 15 years, right?
But we all knew you, Zali. I knew you from 12 years ago.
Fair enough. But I think what's happened since 2019 is you have recognition of this movement, and colour association is a major part of it as well, right? The media has dubbed many of the current crossbench around teals. Everyone tries to always infer there's a party or whatever. There isn't, but the reality is the branding matters, right? So your visibility matters, that association. When the parties don't have to do much work around their candidates get in on the branding of the parties, but independents have to get known to their communities around they're held to account on their capability to do their job, and capacity, whether they're going to be trusted to do the job. So that's really important. It's not just a question of high profile. There are many people that have gotten into Parliament that didn't have a public profile, right? My northern neighbour, Dr. Sophie Stomps, she was one of you. She set up the kitchen table conversation. She wasn't, she was known in her community as a GP. She didn't have a profile in that way.
She was trying to find a candidate, wasn't she?
Exactly. And so Kylie Tink, member for North Sydney, she'd been CEO of the McGrath Foundation, done some incredible work, but ultimately wasn't a public figure, hadn't done work in a public way. So I don't think it's about finding a celebrity or anything like that, but it is finding someone who speaks to you, represents you, has your values at heart, and is going to be take on that role with integrity and honesty. I saw your report, one of the reports that talked about honesty from your representative, and I think that's really important because you're not always going to agree with every decision they make, every vote they make, right? It's impossible. People have different views on issues. But I think honesty and transparency around process and procedure for voting, and knowing that they're doing it in a merit-based way, that they're actually analysing it and thinking about it and taking into account your views, I think is important. And I hope that's what the Warringah community has enjoyed and appreciated in my approach. And for me, I'm constantly going back to them to get their feedback on what is it that is important to them, but also how do they want me to do it as their representatives.
Fantastic. Just in the for the instance of time, we've got 29 questions up here. Don't worry, we're not going to get through them all because we'll be here till midnight. But now we might just see what the next top question is for a final question before we hear from the groups. All right, so a conservative place, the Gold Coast, although, changing rapidly and a lot of new people coming to this area. Tips for changing hearts and minds.
Well, I think it's also being honest. I mean, Warringah is traditionally a fiscally conservative, always liberal, but socially progressive, caring, right? Caring about outcomes. We all care about our children, what environment they're going to have, what opportunities they're going to have, right? And worrying about that intergenerational debt. How are we going to make sure they have the same opportunities? And so being, I think again, fact-based in our approach and looking at that, it's recognising that what are the issues that really matter, and those values around honesty and integrity, these are not left or right issues, right? These are core issues to all voters. And so it's being honest about, is what you've always done working? Is there an option or an opportunity on the table for you that actually is more representative of you? Because the irony is the major parties, we continually hear from the communities that no one trusts politicians, right? Everyone thinks they're just lying, they're in it for themselves, there's no integrity, no accountability. So why continue supporting the same thing if you don't trust that? And so it really is about having the conversation, but have your conversation with your local members. See how they respond. Some of your members might be responsive to your issues and concerns and actually engage well with you. Some a lot less. In Warringah, it was very difficult to get in and talk to Tony about issues.
Resistant budgie smugglers,
and the biggest criticism was you never saw him, he was never there. And so I think for all communities, regardless of being a long-standing conservative community, it's being true to those concerns and finding someone that's prepared to stand up for the community first and foremost.
It's kind of amazing, isn't it, that this idea of having a representative that represents the community and listens to the community and advocates for the community is sort of a novel idea, but that's what the independence is showing us. Well, Zali, we cannot thank you enough for coming to the Gold Coast, for coming to Queensland, spreading your inspiration and your independent magic. Can we just give a huge round of applause and thanks to Zali. And now that you're feeling inspired and pumped up about what could be, if you've been listening to Zali and thinking, yeah, I want one of those, you're going to hear now from the 3 community groups about what's next and how you can get involved.